Okay, we are recording and everyone is here.
Hello, everyone.
How you doing?
Good.
All right, I'll open, so being 6 o'clock and having quorum, I'll open the planning board meeting for May 19th, 2021. We're still operating under Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Bridgewater Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. This meeting is being recorded, and within 48 hours, we will post a link of the recording on the town's website and/or social media pages. So this evening, we have a couple of members absent, but I'm Patrick Driscoll, the chair. Mr. Raymond Jemian, the vice chair, is with us. Mrs. Jean Garino, the clerk. Mr. Stephen Geller. And Mrs. Julia Sant'Angelo is an associate member. During the meeting, all votes will be taken through roll call. If the Bridgewater town staff that is also participating remotely would be Ms. Jennifer Burke, the Community Economic Development Director, and Mrs. Jasmine Farinacci, the Assistant Town Planner, Mr. Azu Antonero, that will be joining us later, the Town Engineer, and Mrs. Leslie Dorr, the Office Administrator. At this time, everyone's mics will be muted. The board's mics will be unmuted through the whole meeting. And as items appear on the agenda, the project's representatives will be unmuted. If the project is a public hearing and allows for public comment, we ask that you use the chat feature to ask your question by listing your name and address and your question. The host will recognize all questions in order. You can also use the raise my hand feature in the participant menu, and you'll be unmuted when the host recognizes you. Again, please state your name and address before speaking and asking a question. If you're on the phone, you may dial *9 to raise your hand. So at 6 o'clock, we have our first public meeting. It's not a public hearing. This is with the Open Space Committee in town. They've reached out to us to have a joint meeting to start the discussions, I believe, on open space. And Mrs. Eileen Heine, I believe, is the chair. Are you here, Mrs. Heine?
I am.
So
Can you hear me?
I'd like to welcome you and your committee, and if you'd like to begin and take over the meeting and explain, what your hopes are, I'd be happy to turn it over to you.
Sure, thank you. Yes, we just wanted to get together. This was actually a suggestion of Town Manager Michael Dutton. The Open Space Committee is a new committee. We've been active for about a year. You may or may not be aware, there wasn't an active Open Space Committee in town for quite a number of years. I don't know just exactly when there actually was one. But our members currently are Kevin Mandeville, who is here, Maureen Manazian, Lauren Webb, and I don't know if Nicole is, I don't know who that number is. Nicole Holmes is our other member, and she was going to have to call in, so I don't know if that's her or not, but I think she will be joining us in a few minutes if she isn't already. First of all, if you can't hear me, let me know. My connection sometimes isn't good, and I may have to stop my video if my voice is not coming through. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, very clearly. I can.
Okay. Oh, all right, good. Okay. So anyway, we finally got started meeting regularly. But we had 2 meetings just before COVID hit. And of course, we didn't accomplish much after that for a while, I think, which is kind of par for the course for a lot of things in life. But we are getting organized now and just trying to reach out and help define our agenda by talking to other committees in town. We are working under the 2017-2018 Open Space Plan, which was adopted by the town a few years ago, and which gives us guidance, but it's very broad-based. There are so many projects identified, possible ways to go, that we're trying to establish some priorities and figure out where our time and efforts are best spent. So we had a joint meeting with the Parks and Recreation group, Parks and Recreation Commission, quite a number of months ago. And we're having this meeting with you tonight. We have a joint meeting with the Conservation Commission set up for next week. And then we'll probably meet with the Agricultural Committee coming up too. So it seems like Michael Dutton suggested that there were probably areas where we could work together on things, areas where our issues of concern overlap. So I don't have any formal agenda for tonight. There are no particular issues that we want to raise or discuss, but mostly just to get a sense from you as to where open space issues might come up in your proceedings, where it might have some, where it might be helpful to have some clarification about what open space values are, what open space management and maintenance over time is needed for open space parcels that are created, and where you've seen these issues come up either in your subdivision reviews or in other areas. And I can't say that I'm really familiar with your work. I've sat in on a few of your meetings, but I don't consider myself very well versed in exactly how you proceed and what you do. I do know that what you do is far more prescribed than what we do. We're a little bit free flowing at this point, in that we can kind of pick the issues, the areas of interest, whether it's the town parklands, whether it's agricultural preservation, water quality. We have a pretty broad statement of purpose that covers preserving Bridgewater's semi-rural character, protecting water resources and buffers, looking at existing conservation lands and seeing how those can be expanded or used in service of other adjacent lands, providing public access for walking, biking, passive recreation, preserving or enhancing streetscape views or vistas, preserving wildlife and vegetation habitat, limiting the impacts of climate change, and contributing to long-term environmental sustainability. So that's pretty broad, pretty all-encompassing. And what we need to do is, of course, fit it into more practical aspects of what is actually going on in the town. And you have such a big role to play in that and what you do, that we just wanted to have some feedback from you and have a discussion. Let me see, I wanted to say, if one of the issues we did want to raise specifically is the trees, the protection of trees. I know that's been discussed with you before. I think I understand there's a new ad hoc tree committee, and Nicole Holmes has been asked to be on that by Michael Dutton. And so we wanted to see if you had any particular thoughts about how the issue of trees comes up in your proceedings. And if you'll excuse me, I want to see if Nicole is calling me. Someone is calling on my phone, and I want to find out if it's her. Hold on. No, it's not. All right, I'm back. Okay, so with that, I think that's probably all I wanted to do to just introduce this. One thing I do want to give a nod to Kevin Mandefield, because he was the sole member of this committee for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think he deserves a nod of appreciation. We appreciate him. He has been attending the Community Preservation Committee meetings for years on behalf of the Open Space Committee, because that is another one of our roles to weigh in on the way those funds are dispersed, because one of the areas that are eligible for community preservation funds are open space projects. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Eileen. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yep. So with that, is there anything that you would like to discuss with us? Any questions that you have? Any thoughts about how we might help you? I've looked through your regulations just briefly this afternoon, and I do see open space mentioned in a few provisions. So I assume you have had to deal with the issue in one form or another. but I'm not sure exactly how. So I think we could learn from you, and perhaps you could tell us where in the future we might be able to help as these issues come up and come before you in particular projects and plans. And actually, if anybody else on my committee wants to add to anything I've said, feel free to do so. If not, okay.
Mrs. Heine, I just have one thought. And then hopefully other board members can give you some feedback. We're looking, I believe, to recodify the zoning coming up. And then
Okay.
after that, I think, and don't hold me to this, but I think the plan is that a number of zoning ordinances will be introduced or be introduced to be modified. And I think one of them is going to be the open space development zoning that we currently have.
Oh,
And I think when that comes up, that would be important that your team at least attends that one so we can talk about percentages. Because what it does is it encourages developers to leave big tracts of open space, but not losing any density. So they build denser developments,
mhm.
but they keep large, swaths of open space, and for those reasons, water quality protection and wildlife and et cetera. So I think when that comes up, it would be important that you guys attend that public hearing, either as a group or as citizens to comment on that.
Yeah, that sounds directly on point. What is the time frame for that?
I think Mrs. Farinacci or Ms. Breck would have to answer that. I don't know when their schedule is.
Okay, well, just
So
generally.
I can just quickly respond to that. So it's been to the council for first reading that while the recodification has been to council for first reading, it's been referred to the planning board and the CEDC. We're currently waiting for the new council president to choose the new subcommittees of the council before we schedule that meeting. It has to be scheduled before, I believe it's July 7th though, so it will likely happen sometime in June, the recodification. The pieces that Pat is referring to will happen sometime thereafter. I don't have a specific time frame on that.
Okay, but it sounds like you're the person I could keep in touch with, Jennifer, to keep track of it. Okay. thank
Yeah,
you.
Yes.
I think the board members can keep you. I mean, I'm sure we'll make sure you're notified when that piece of it's coming up anyway.
Okay, all right, that sounds like a great suggestion.
And then I just have a general question. Is your committee proactively working on anything with CPA, like conservation restrictions for existing agricultural lands or anything like that in town? Are you identifying ones you'd like to preserve?
Yeah, one thing that came up recently is I attended the last Community Preservation Committee meeting, as did Kevin, who's our representative there. And the Hanson Farm is interested in getting a conservation restriction on their property. And the Open Space Committee is going to be heading up that project.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of exciting. That's one of the more tangible things that we've had to work on. So that's really promising, and that we'll be working with the Hansons and then trying to figure out what the structure will be of the project and the arrangement, and then trying to identify funding. So yeah,
Great.
that's one big thing. Another project that we've started talking about is the Wildlands Trust. I don't know if you're familiar with that organization, but they hold a number of properties in Southeast Mass. The Great River Preserve is one, maybe most well known to Bridgewater residents, but they own a property over adjacent to the Wyman Meadows Parkland, which is one of the Bridgewater Conservation Commission areas. And we're talking to them and about possibly working together. That's an underutilized, one of the very most underutilized properties in Bridgewater in terms of open access for the public. It's not well known, not well publicized. It's also part of the water department's wellhead, and it's been more, the focus has been more on that. But the Wildlands Trust people have a parcel adjacent to that. Both of them are on the Taunton River, and we're starting discussions about how to work with them so that we can use the town land to provide access for them to get access to their property so that we would create a co-joined town open space along with this preserve that Wyman Meadows. And so that's another particular project that we've just started talking about within the last couple of weeks. Other things that have come up at different public meetings, like the Community Preservation Committee had a public meeting where people call in and say things like what they think needs, what needs to be done for the town, for particular open space and our existing parks is signage, places Carver Pond, Titicut, Tuckerwood, Stiles and Hart. We have a number of beautiful parkland and open space parcels in town. Some of them are just not very well known. They're not very well identified. There's poor signage, not very good parking. And so it's been a long-term project that's been identified in prior plans that we need to get we need to get some sort of uniform signage, more adequate and properly designed signage. And so that's another thing that keeps coming up. And so we're hoping to perhaps go to the Conservation Commission and work with them on something along those lines. And
So this is kind of informal, board members, so just ask questions to Mrs. Heine and her committee if you have any.
I do. Eileen, obviously I take it your board is an advisory board. You have no powers to actually set aside open space. But my question is that two parts. One, have you identified areas in town that are open now that aren't really set aside for open space? And if you do, say, come up with a certain amount of acreage, what's the plan for actually setting it aside and preserving it as open space? Is there a plan at this point?
No, that's further than we've gotten, Ray. I mean, I think for instance, there are chapter 61 parcels that are set aside for agriculture or recreational or forestry purposes. And I know one of the comments that was made at one of the public meetings was, had we put together a list of those, and I believe there is a list in prior town plans. I think maybe the past master plan, or I think even the open space plan has a list of those, which is probably a little bit out of date now. And so one of the things we're looking at is what's the status of all of those properties, and in some cases, it might be worth approaching a landowner to find out what their intentions are for that property and try to find out if somebody is willing to set it aside for open space or agricultural use. I mean, essentially, that's what the Hansons are talking about, is having that property set aside. So no, we don't. I couldn't tell you exactly what the steps are. I haven't been through it myself. But what we're doing is starting a few steps back from that and trying to figure out where to start, what properties to identify, and then figure out the next steps. And really, for instance, with the Hansons, right now at this stage, we're trying to put together what the steps would be. And then when they're actually ready to move, then to implement it. But it's a process of identifying where the funding would come from, and what the restrictions would be, and that sort of thing. So
Well, just on that point, 61A, I believe, is just agricultural land. What about forest land that's forested right now? How would that be looked at?
Yeah, well, that would be the same thing. I mean, it was,
Okay.
if it's 61 land, then, if we identified a parcel that, let's say we found a parcel that was adjacent to Stiles and Hart, which is, and I'm not saying there is such a parcel, but if there was one, or any Carver Pond or something where, is it abutting an existing parcel, then there might be a real incentive to try to get that protected in some way by approaching a landowner who owns that 61 property and seeing if we can find some way to acquire it.
Have you looked at other towns as to what they're doing in terms of protecting land?
Yeah. I mean, I attended a Conservation Commission conference that one of the state agencies put on, and yeah, there's tons of information. There's also a whole list of all the Community Preservation Act projects that have been funded in other towns for different similar efforts. So yeah, there's a lot of things to look at. A lot of other towns do provide great examples in many of these projects.
But all in favor, what you're doing.
Ray, I can, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Hi, this is Nicole Holmes. I know Eileen was trying to call, check in with me before, and I was trying to unmute my line. So thank you for all that introduction. And I did just want to chime in as well on just kind of the overall idea of trees that Eileen had brought up in the ad hoc tree committee that was being formed. I think it's related, to the protection of parcels and the idea of acquiring parcels to maintain them under protection. But even still, I think the other interest of our committee is really the one most powerful tool that we have to kind of address all of our overarching goals of protecting the quality of our water resources and being resilient to climate change and all of this is really just the trees, and the fact that this town is still blessed with forest and existing forest and large canopy trees. And so we're, definitely bringing up ideas about how we can, work within our form of government to help protect more of the trees, if possible, whether it's like a tree ordinance or something to that effect. We've just been sort of doing a lot of research on how other towns of similar size would handle such a thing. I think, some of the clear cutting and things of that nature are definitely detrimental to the connections that we have with our open space and kind of making connections between our rivers and the protected open space. So just another kind of area of interest that we are exploring, and I'm happy to see that Mr. Dutton has, begun to form this ad hoc tree committee, and I guess we can see where it goes.
Maybe we could talk offline at some other point about this, because there are other issues here.
Yeah, yep.
Ray, just to chime in with your question as well, another option that actually is very popular, it's very common, is that if it's a forest land or an open field, what have you, that's related to open space, a lot of times we'll work with a land trust of some sort. So they would hold the deed, and there would be terms that would be set to ensure that it remains open space as well. The town works with different trusts too.
Yeah. I think the quicker we come up with some sort of rules regarding this, the better, because there is obviously push for development, and many places that are obviously open for development are treed and open areas that we may want to preserve. So the sooner we put something together, the better.
Well, every situation is different. So one might be suited more towards a trust, or sometimes the town will just buy it outright if we have the funds or what have you. So I think every situation is just a little different. Each one's better for each situation too.
And if I can speak to your point, Ray, we agreed. I mean, there's a sense of urgency here. I think with the way development is happening, we see that you can look at the open space plan from 2017 and see how many of the parcels are no longer available for open space, whether it's agricultural or forest or whatever. They've been used for other purposes. And I know one of the things that we hear and see in some of the comments is there's great interest in seeing us utilize the open space that we have, like the conservation lands that I mentioned, the park lands, Titicaca, places like Carver Pond, et cetera, that people feel like we have a lot of open space and it's underutilized. The town hasn't had the money or the staff to keep it up or service it as we would like to see. So maybe we should just focus on that. But I think our sense is that those parcels exist and they are protected, and we hope the town is going to be able to hire staff to see that they're properly maintained and managed. And but we think what's crucial is that we identify the places that may not be available in the next 5 years or 10 years if we don't look at them now. So while the argument may be, well, why don't you just focus on what we have and make sure that it's accessible and usable, et cetera? I think the counter argument is, yes, but if we don't identify additional parcels and save them now, they will be lost to development. So I think that in many sense, in a sense, we feel that that is the more urgent thing for us to look at right now. Any other questions?
Mr. Driscoll, I just have a just quick question for you. For Bridgewater specifically, what's the minimum development plot that people need to have to build a house now?
So an individual lot would be 18,500 square feet in residential C or D. So that's less than half an acre. In residential A, which is most of the residential land in town, it's 1 acre. It's 43,560. So the town is broken up into essentially 3 zoning districts. It used to be 4. They combined A and B. So to build one house in residential AB, you'd need 150 feet of frontage and 43,560 square feet, which is 1 acre. In C and D, you'd need 18.5 for a single family with 125 feet of frontage. But for a duplex, you'd need 30,000 with 150 feet. And in D, you'd need 20,000 for a duplex with 125 frontage, and you need 18.5 for a single family. So you have the central business district, which is like downtown, and then the closer you are to basically downtown, that's a D. And then as you move a little further out, there's C. And I'm just giving general descriptions. And then
Sure.
the further out you are, it's A. You know, so most of the town I'd say is A, B.
Right, because when it goes, like, I'm assuming AB is the more lenient parameters for building.
AB, it's tougher because you need more land. I'd say D is the most lenient because you can do single families, duplexes, and you need less land area. C, you can do single family and duplexes, but for duplex, you need a little more land area. And then A, you can only do single families and you need 1 acre, and that's most of the town.
Okay. Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean if you own 5 acres, you get 5 houses either, right? So you need, if you did a subdivision, then you have to lay your road out. Then you have to consider if there's wetlands. Then we require a drainage lot with 20 feet of frontage. You know, the 40-foot right away. So if you own 5 acres, you might get 2 or 3 houses. You know what I mean? So it doesn't always mean, you know, density isn't a simple formula. That it all depends on a number of factors: topography, wetlands. You know, whether it's in a zone 2 aquifer or not. You might need more square footage for bedrooms, things like that.
Of course. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
So we have a zoning map online. So if you want to look at it, you can see where AB is, where C, and where D is. Then obviously we have the industrial and business zones. So
Mr.
Is that
Chairman,
on the Bridgewater website?
I could ask Mrs. Farinacci. That's on the, if we go into the CED website after the zoning bylaws, it's in the back, right? Zoning map.
the zoning map is on the Town of Bridgewater Building Department page, the inspectional services.
Okay.
So that's where the zoning map is located. But I just wanted to point out that it is 6:30. So if you wanted to make any closing comments, we could
Okay.
continue.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all for taking the time. I know you have a very tight agenda and that you meet frequently, so we appreciate your spending 30 minutes with us, and encourage you to contact me or any member of the committee anytime if you see opportunities for us to work together on something, and I think that would be useful. So,
Well, just before we go, do any other board members, Julia, Steve, Jean, any more questions for the committee?
I'll probably have more, but I can email.
I'm good right now. Thank you.
I'm all set, thank you.
Julia,
No, I'm all set, thank you.
do you guys have a Any sort of social media presence or anything, or email that people could email you at, or is it just your personal emails?
It's just our personal emails.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry for the short time slot, but we didn't want to push you out too far, and we
Yeah.
have a couple other things tonight, so.
Yes, I'm sure. No, this was perfectly adequate because it was really we just wanted to meet and greet and maybe lay the plan, a layout for future meetings or future issues to work with as they come up. So anyway, that was our purpose, and I think we've met it. So
Yeah, we
Great.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
all right.
Thanks.
I believe Judy Barrett is here from Barrett Planning Group. Judy, do you have anyone with you today?
No,
Hey,
I am.
Jasmine, hold on a second. I'll
Oh,
open
sure.
it.
Sorry.
Sorry, Pat. Are you going to be sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to find, I just lost my agenda. Could you pull up the agenda on the screen? Oh, you have it right there.
It's on the screen.
Could you, pull that up? Could you blow that up, please?
Sure.
Jasmine, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right, so this is just a public meeting. It's not a public hearing, correct?
Right. Yes.
So there's no notice or anything to the public. It was just on the agenda. So, all right, so
Correct.
being 6:30, I'll open the public meeting with the comprehensive master plan. It's a presentation with the Barrett Consulting Group. So if representatives are here from the Barrett Consulting Group, or if town staff wants to give an update or an introduction, we can start with town staff and then move into the Barrett Consulting Group.
It's fine.
Sure, I don't really need to give an introduction, but I certainly can. So we've been working on this master plan update now, gosh, for probably close to 2 years now, I think, at least 18 months. And we've been working with the Barrett Planning Group throughout that process. We had a committee made up of several different citizens and board members of different boards and things like that. So we've had some public hearings, some public meetings, some public inputs. We've done some surveys. We've had social media presence. We've had some really good public outreach. It's been a long process, but I think we've gotten some good information from it. And I think Barrett's done a great job with putting it all together for us and coming up with the draft document. So they're here tonight to kick off the planning board's review of the drafts, which you've all received the links to. We're currently working on the implementation phase, which is a staff phase of the project, and Barrett is working with staff members on that phase of it. And hopefully at some point we'll integrate that into the planning board's review as well, because ultimately at the end of this, the goal is to have the planning board adopt this as the town's official master plan. So with that, I will turn it over to Judy Barrett.
Okay, I think just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and bring some slides up. It'll just sort of help me organize kind of how I want to lay this out for the board. So let me just do that, if I may. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Super. Okay. So as Jennifer said, we are kind of moving into now trying to develop the implementation program for the master plan, the draft of which I know you have, and I'll talk a little bit about the review process for that in a minute. But we're really kind of moving into this phase of So there are a lot of great ideas that have come out of this process from the committee, from the public participants in the various meetings that we had, from survey, other things that were done along the way. And now the question is, how do we turn as much of this as we can into actionable steps? So that's kind of where we are. And I've worked on probably 20, well, I guess now it's probably 28 master plans in Massachusetts. And I think that when you get to this point, what you're really trying to do is harness the resources of the community's government, planning board and other town boards and committees, the staff, certainly, as Jennifer said, the people in the community who care about the place, and recognizing that kind of where you are in the region is also an asset, and try to pull all of those things together into an action plan that will go at least kind of 10 years, and frankly, a way to kind of monitor your progress on that. So our scope for what we're calling this phase 2 is primarily working with the staff, as Jennifer said, to come up with those kind of actionable ways to take the strategies in the draft plan into sort of a scheduled approach to doing the things that are identified in the plan. Through this process, we'll end up refining the wording of some of those strategies and try to sort of, determine which things are low-hanging fruit and can be done early on, and which things will probably take a lot more, sort of consensus work and development over the years. Looking at kind of the implementation program and marrying that with the inventories and assessments and plan goals, all of which, those pieces you have, into one consolidated document. And then coming back to present the whole thing to you with town staff in a few months. So this is kind of the schedule that we're working on right now. We have a meeting coming up with town staff next week. And what we've been trying to do is make sure, before we kind of march into this phase of action items for the plan, is to make sure that we know what is in other plans the town has worked on, because you've done a lot, to your credit. But just making sure we understand if there are actions and recommendations and implementation pieces to those plans that need to be built into the comprehensive plan, that we don't lose sight of those things. So I'll talk a little bit about how that process is happening in a minute. In June, kind of coming out of that effort we're in right now, we would be really trying to come up with those more actionable items. There's a lot of strategies in the plan right now that are sort of the what you want to do, but the actions are necessary to sort of say, and then how do you do this? Finalizing those actions into concrete recommendations would be sort of over the summer. And then hopefully putting this whole thing together in August is really where we are right now. That's the schedule we're working on. So understanding kind of the framework of a master plan, the pieces that tie the whole thing together are the community's vision statement, the goals of the plan, the strategies that will help to address those goals, and then the implementation program itself. Everything else in the plan is sort of topic-based things that the community, any community would want to look at in a master plan process, whether it's land use or housing or historic preservation. There are all these sort of topic elements in the plan, but they all have to sort of be brought together under this overarching framework. And that's really what the action plan that we're working on now attempts to do. I know you've already seen all this. I did not put the whole vision statement up. I just wanted to kind of point out what some of the key words are in that vision statement, because we're certainly thinking about this as we work on the action plan. We heard a lot in the public participation process about people being really proud of the town's historic, heritage, and wanting to be able to sort of grow and adapt to change and celebrate diversity, and at the same time protect all those things that the community really cherishes about what it is. To be a place that has sound fiscal management and excellent schools and reliable services and all the things that residents in any community would want to say they have in their town. To be prepared to deal with resiliency and climate change, looking at ways that the town can embrace the use of renewable energy resources, partnering with Bridgewater State. We heard a lot about this, both from the university itself and then also from townspeople, to kind of be able to position Bridgewater to be a hub of culture and commerce, given its location and given the fact that it has a university, literally it's in its downtown, and revitalizing that downtown. And then being a place that actually, is an attractive employment area for people in the region, being really an economic center. So if you can do all those things, you become the community, or you are the community that has both a retained sense of place, that is retained in all the things that make Bridgewater beautiful, the culture that the town is so proud of, a place that's accessible both, socially and physically, and a place that has tremendous pride. And those are things that I think any community wants to be able to say, and Bridgewater certainly should be able to say. So for all the goals that are in the plan that kind of ride under that vision, there are these strategies. I'm not going to read them all. I'm kind of going to just, because you have the plan. So I don't want to make everybody read every word of text on these slides, but I want to just kind of quickly go through what some of the things are that we're looking at, trying to kind of translate into more actionable steps in the implementation program. So the transportation goal, for example, has kind of two parts to it, which is minimizing vehicular congestion downtown and reducing single occupancy vehicle trips. So there are strategies that would kind of support that. And many of these were really developed by McMahon Associates, which worked with us on the first phase of the master plan. They are the transportation consultants who've also done work for the town separate from the master plan process. So they kind of took these goals that were articulated in the planning process and came up with sort of 4 strategies that ought to be in the plan. Our job now is to try to turn these into more actionable steps. Similarly, under land use, the sort of goal had 2 parts to it: a clear and concise and transparent set of zoning
Excuse me, Judy,
Yes.
are you meaning to change the slides as you talk?
Yes, I am changing them. Are you not seeing them?
I'm still, well, maybe my computer froze. I'm still on the first slide.
Yeah,
I am as well.
So
Oh my
am I.
gosh, guys, I'm sorry. Let me see what the problem is. Because
I was saying to myself, this is a long intro.
I am so sorry, guys. I don't know why I don't know why that's happening. So if you will just give me a minute to figure this out. Because I am seeing many slides progress here, and clearly you are not. And I honestly don't know why.
I just pulled up the link and started following it online, but then I said, I think you
Isn't
mean.
that strange? Because I'm seeing a full screen. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to back out of this. I'm going to stop share for a minute. And I'm going to reshare. How's that? Share. I'm sorry to do this, folks. I honestly thought I was just going away here with slides.
That's all right. So now we're seeing land use goal.
You are?
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's where you are, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Let's hope that this continues to progress. My comments were that there are several goals in the plan tied to each element. And strategy ideas that are in the draft that you have. My comment was simply that in this implementation phase, our job now is to try to put some concrete actionable steps under these strategies so that the town can actually do something with them. So when we talk about things like smart growth, I can tell you, given the number of towns I work in, that even that term means many things to many people. And so we want to try to clarify how that relates to development and growth and change and conservation in Bridgewater. Public access to zoning information, how easily can people get information about the town's existing zoning? Making sure that the boards have clear rules and regulations. I know you're looking at a redraft of the zoning bylaw, but there are a lot of things that kind of don't belong in a zoning bylaw that really are more appropriate for board rules and regulations. So those are the kinds of things that we get a little more, I guess, granular, if you will, in the implementation program. Now I've just changed to a slide for economic development goals. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. These are the goals: retaining existing businesses and drawing new establishments, co-locating housing, shopping, and jobs in select areas to reduce single occupancy commute. So this is an example of where a goal for economic development relates back to a goal for transportation. And you kind of want to have as much integration as you can in a master plan. And again, there are strategies to attempt to address those goals, such as encouraging the formation of a downtown business group, including the businesses, property owners, Bridgewater State, and others, fostering collaboration with a chamber of commerce, local or regional chambers. And so it's order to kind of take advantage of the assets that they offer. Carrying out strategies to activate storefronts. One of the things we find, especially coming out of the pandemic, is that most town centers are having some issues with whether tenants will actually come back or will they be able to be as vibrant as they were. So things to kind of help a downtown area around activating storefronts is an example of something where we would probably put a lot more detail in the implementation of program about how to do that. It's a strategy, but now how do you go about doing it? Improving parking and infrastructure to draw businesses. I mean, this relates right back to things like the town's capital improvements plan or making use of state or federal funds for roadway improvements. And how do you sort of tie those things into wanting to support economic growth in the community? Encouraging mixed use development and branding the town. These are all kind of things that are really kind of almost common sense economic development strategies that would support the goals. There are two parts to the housing goal: necessary infrastructure to meet the town's housing needs and accommodating the needs of seniors and people with disabilities and others to retain the diversity Bridgewater has and increase it. And so there are some strategies, of course, in the plan to address those, whether it's you have a housing production plan, how are you going to implement it? Partnering with developers, exploring opportunities to retrofit existing structures for housing, encouraging a mix of housing types with walking and biking access for residents, and adopting zoning that enables the creation of senior housing and so on. So those are all strategies that would be in support of the goals. The question is, how do you do them? That's what the role of the implementation program is. Similarly, under natural and cultural resources and open space, we've tried to break this content up more in the draft plan than it originally was. But for purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to kind of keep these three topics together. The goals have to do with establishing, confirming the establishment of the town and making it clear that the town is a cultural, intellectual, and recreational hub in the region. And then protecting its natural resources while also promoting the use and access to the town's open space. So strategies in support of that goal include things like, having adequate planning and monitoring of the open space that you have, improving access to parks and open space, wayfinding, which really is kind of it's not just signage, but it's a whole system of making sure that people know how to find the open space that Bridgewater has. The more it's used, frankly, the more likely it is that it becomes possible to protect it. Encouraging stewardship and volunteer support for the parks and playgrounds and parklands. Preserving and promoting awareness of your cultural and historic resources. I think one of the lessons that we most enjoyed coming out of the master plan process was what your community has in terms of cultural and historic assets and how the important role that those things can play as the town continues to evolve. Encouraging resident interaction with the resources of Bridgewater State. And we know part of Bridgewater State's strategic plan is kind of forging better and stronger ties to the town. And it kind of makes sense for the town's plan to say, and guess what, we want to do that too, because we could all grow together and we could all benefit from each other. And then planning for, resilience to climate change. Public facilities, the two parts of the goal are providing efficient, high quality services and reducing municipal energy use. There are a variety of strategies under that: maintaining your green community designation, soliciting resident input about satisfaction with municipal facilities and services at regular intervals. I know some of that's been done already. That's great. Periodically doing that. I know of a couple of towns in Massachusetts that do kind of surveys of how are we doing about every 5 years. Working in collaboration with the school district to meet the needs of all students. And we heard a lot from people about wanting to really make sure the desire for excellent schools and support for the schools is expressed in this plan. Employing green infrastructure on town properties to reduce flow to surface waters and frankly, address stormwater management. Promoting alternative energy, balancing services with short and long-term budget considerations, and then prioritizing transparency and communication with the public. So how do we take all that now and move to sort of measurable actions? First of all, you have a Dropbox. I'm sure Jennifer shared it with you or shared it with you in some manner with the complete draft plan that's been prepared. And so we are really looking forward to getting your comments. I want you to know how we use the comments matrix that's in that Dropbox. This is an example of what happened with previous drafts where people were asked to, they were asked for their comments in a format that, as you can see here, has several columns. We're asking people to say, so what page are you talking about? What's the line number? And what is this? Is this sort of is it editorial? Is it substantive? What is it? So the person puts the comment in and then we make a response. And so the advantage to this is that the town eventually gets back what we call a CRM. It's a comments resolution matrix where every comment we got, we've provided a response to. Sometimes these responses are, we've done it. We've just made the change that was suggested, or sometimes we've made the change, but in a different place than the commenter suggested. Sometimes people will ask for a change that's just beyond the scope of a master plan, but we want to at least respond to them and say, we considered it, it's not something we can do right now, or it's something maybe that gets dealt with in the implementation phase. So your comments will get the same degree of consideration, and we do look forward to getting them. In terms of the implementation program, this is essentially what we're doing. We're verifying the status of other plans that the town has done, really going back to the 2002 plan. We just want to know of the things that have been recommended or the action plans that have developed, how much has actually been done. And it's not to give the town a report card. It's for us to know, are there things in these other plans that we need to make sure make it into the comprehensive plan implementation program as well. Writing up, developing the sort of actions to implement the strategies I just described to you, kind of a time frame for implementing them. By time frame, I don't mean we're going to say in the draft plan, you should do this in July of 2023. It's really more, is this a near-term thing? Is it low-hanging fruit? Is it something that is more moderate term, or is this really a longer-term aspiration? As well as dependencies, and by that I mean, it's very frequent in an action plan for a step to be listed that can't go forward until something else is done. So we need to be clear in the actions in the plan that they're like that. What are the dependencies on which this particular action is reliant? Who should be doing what and who should be collaborating with whom? So we kind of make it clear, what staff, what's perhaps belongs with the council or a board or something. If there's a budget implication, we will attempt to identify that. We don't always have numbers for that, but we usually can say, yeah, there may be an additional expenditure required for this, or no, it can be accomplished with existing staff or something. We can't do, I'm sure you can understand, detailed budgets for capital improvements, but we can kind of give you a sense of, are these big ticket items or not? And then a plan, and this is critical, for evaluating the town's progress on the master plan. People always ask us, how do we have a plan that doesn't sit on the shelf? And the answer to the question is, you need to implement it. And so the best way to sort of know whether you're implementing it is to monitor your progress. And there are a variety of ways that the town can do that, which we'll lay out in the implementation program and try to give you some ideas to keep the plan alive and moving forward, and also to perhaps even be amended if it's necessary. So right now we're in this mode of, we looked at a whole variety of other plans. Don't try to read this list and say, oh, you forgot whatever plan, because frankly, Alexis, who put most of these slides together, couldn't even get them all on one slide. But we've tried to go through all of them and put together a sort of a survey just to ask the town staff and boards and committees, was this stuff done? Just to help us understand what the status is of the recommendations in these plans. We're not critiquing the content. We're not critiquing, the analysis. We're just saying, here are recommendations that were in these plans. Can you help us understand what is still relevant, what is already done and can just be forgotten about, and stuff that even if it's underway, it should be recognized in this plan as an ongoing obligation of the town. So that's kind of where we are. We're just surveying all of this. And so I admit, a fairly long survey, but anybody who fills it out, bless you. We're asking people, and we've sent the links for all of this to town staff to circulate, but we're just asking, what happened with these recommendations? Where are they, and should we keep them? And we'll just use the information we receive from responses to that to try to sort out what now goes in this comprehensive plan, action plan. We're also going to be asking town boards, can you just tell us like what your priorities are? Any challenges that exist that perhaps we should be aware of. Jennifer is absolutely right that the implementation phase of a master plan is mainly something that gets worked out with town staff, because much of what happens in a master plan moving forward is handled at the staff level. But it's also true that your town, like every town I've worked in, has boards and committees that are also out there doing things that may or may not have staff helping them, because there's just only so many staff and so many boards and committees. But we want to sort of understand kind of what's going on with the boards and committees that maybe belongs in this plan. I can't say everything we're going to hear goes in it, but at least it'll help us know if we're saying such and such a board should have a role in implementing something in this plan, we're going to know whether they're already on overload, because they can answer these questions for us. And it's just really a Word document where people can just give us their responses. And again, we've just given that, I think, to Jennifer in the last day or so. So we're giving people till the end of June to sort of respond to those questions. I think what we're hoping for is that we don't get individual board member responses, but rather a board might look at it at one of their meetings and decide kind of what they want to do in response to this as a board. That would be the most helpful thing, I think, to us. So we're not trying to then understand whether we're looking at an individual's perception of things or not. So, I mean, we're not prescribing how you do this, but I'm telling you that's kind of what we're hoping to get. And, hoping to wrap this up, as I said, by the end of the summer. It's been a long and fun process, but I'm sure you guys want to get on with master plan implementation, and we'd like to get you there. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try to respond. I also have other appointments tonight, but I'm happy to, answer a few questions if you have them. And do you want me to keep this up or stop share?
You can stop sharing. The link has been provided and is on the town website, I believe.
Perfect.
Correct, Mrs. Farinacci?
Correct.
All right, so are there any board questions or comments for Mrs. Barrett? No. So Judy, I just saw that CRM is 120 pages of comments and adjustments to
We did.
120.
We responded to every comment we got.
So
We're not asking you to read that.
all right.
We gave you a blank of the CRM so that you could give us your comments.
All right.
I
I
want
was
you to know.
under the impression you wanted us to comment on all those comments.
No, sir. We want your comments on the draft plan.
All
I
right.
just wanted you to see what we give back to you so that you will know what we did with your comments. But no, sir, you do not have to read.
But if there's anything we disagree in those 121 pages of comments, we could just identify those specific ones.
Absolutely. Yes.
You need those by June 30th?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have plenty to do right now, so it's not holding us up, but we certainly would like your feedback.
All right. Any other board questions or comments?
London, honey.
Jean, are you trying to say something?
No,
No? Okay. All right. Well, if there's no board comments, thank you, Mrs. Barrett.
Thank you. I'll be back. See you in a few months.
thank you.
Good luck.
All right. Yeah. All right. Take care. Have a good evening. Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right on schedule. Is Mr. Antonero on?
He is.
All right. So just for members of the public that have just recently joined, earlier on in the meeting, we read the guidelines for public hearings. At 7 p.m. we do have a public hearing. The way the public hearing will work is I'll open the public hearing. We'll ask the project's representatives to make their presentation. We'll open it up to board question and comments with staff and with the applicant. And then we'll certainly open it up to public comment. In the public comment phase, we just ask that in the chat feature, you state your name and address for the record. The host will recognize you through the chair, and we'll ask you to speak. Just again, state your name and address for the record when you do begin to speak. So we have that for the record. So that being said, being 7 o'clock and having quorum, I'll open the public hearing for Maderas Estates, which I believe has been changed to Ceredum Estates.
Ceredum Way.
Ceredum Way, which is a 10-lot subdivision off High Street. I believe they're represented by SEA and Associates. And at this point, Mrs. Farinacci, do we have the public hearing?
I do.
Could you read that into the record?
Absolutely. On Wednesday, May 19th, 2021 at 7 p.m., the Bridgewater Planning Board will conduct a public hearing via Zoom on application by Joseph Arruda for approval of a 10-lot subdivision proposed on a 7.52 acre adjacent to 970 High Street, Bridgewater, Assessors Map 5, lots 8, 9, 36, and 90. The plans were prepared by Silva Engineering are on file in the office with the town clerk and the Community and Economic Development Office. All interested persons are intended to attend.
All right, great. And we have received the abutters notification green cards.
Yes, we have. Ashley sent those to us this morning.
All right, great. So with that all taken care of, could we open it up to the applicants at this point?
Absolutely. Larry, would you like to share? Do you have, is it just you?
No, it's just me right now. Rebecca may be joining, but I
Okay.
think that you were gonna be in control of the
Oh,
plan.
sure. You've got it. We'll pull him right back up.
Rebecca said you do a good job at it.
She's very kind. Thank you.
Okay, so this subdivision is located along High Street, just east of Haywood Street, and basically extends from High Street, the land into East Bridgewater. It is in the Zone 2 associated with East Bridgewater drinking wells that are further up the road. And we call it a 10-lot subdivision, but what you'll find is that we really are calling out 9 lots and an existing house, which is adjacent to it, which has the potential to be divided into 2 lots should they decide to. So hence, it's shown as 10 lot. The goal here is to actually access from High. Well, I should talk to you first about what the existing conditions are. The existing conditions, primarily, it's just there are a number of outbuildings that you can see on the site itself. The grade kind of comes up high and then goes back down towards, it comes from High Street, goes up in grade, and then declines in grade as it goes back into East Bridgewater towards the river. And we went out there, we did test pits out there before we started design. And I can tell you that it's sand and gravel from the surface down to as far as we could go with the largest machine we had. So it's all sand and gravel, 25 feet plus in all areas that we dug from High Street area all the way back to the back of the property. So what we have proposed here is to, as you can switch to what we have for a layout. The layout is it's a cul-de-sac which bananas to the right. And I did want to point out that it is still called Maderas Way as far as the subdivision, but because of your rules and regulations about not having a proper name, we had to adjust the actual name of the road within the subdivision. Ceredum Way is actually Madeira spelled backwards. And I think we have another one like that, Trevor's Way is the same thing as Loppard's spelled backwards. So what we have here is this banana shaped or dog leg right subdivision, and they are lots that meet the requirements of the residential C district, which is a minimum of 18,500 square feet. Some of them are a little bit over it. Some of them are in excess of 20,000 square feet. We make an acknowledgement on the cover page that we realize that it's in the Zone 2 of East Bridgewater. And this is one of those cases where zoning and implementation of building, there is sort of a contradiction in the sense that you're allowed to do smaller lots, but in order to do lots that can substantiate that can sustain a 3 or 4 bedroom house, you have to deal with the nitrogen loading requirements. And that is done in this case here by some set aside land, and also with the understanding that some of it will be done with denitrification septic systems in order to be able to accommodate 3 and 4 bedroom houses on the lots. And that's just, I'm speaking to actually some comments that actually were made about this. So in the past, when we were looking at this property, it seemed like it would have been sort of natural to bring some of the drainage towards High Street. But the problem is that once you get at the High Street, there in the area of Lot 9, as you see where Lot 9 is, earlier concepts kind of showed, well, maybe we can bring drainage to that area. But the problem is there's no outlet for it. So even though you have these good soils, you wouldn't have a place for overflow. And we found that the better way to deal with it would be to actually bring the drainage to the rear of the site, which meant we had to cut the grade somewhat to do that. And as you'll see that there are a couple of places where we either have to do a retaining wall or we have to get a grading easement from a neighbor if that's possible. Otherwise, we do the wall in order to accommodate the grade change. So if you go to the next sheet, that kind of gives you an idea of what how we are going to be laying out the road. And as you can see, the drainage as it exits. It exits in the area of, I'm trying to see which lot number that is. Not easy to lay these plans out on your table at home, I can tell you that. Okay. So in between lots 2 and 3 is where we have this drainage lot that heads out towards East Bridgewater. So it's heading north towards East Bridgewater. And that's where we, as you can see, there are 2 areas where, from a grade point of view, we're going to have a structural engineered wall in 2 locations, should there not be another way to be able to grade, say, to adjacent land. I know my client has talked to folks there about that, but we're prepared to have a retaining wall in those areas. The drainage design has been done in accordance with the Zone 2 requirement, and it's also has been submitted to the town of East Bridgewater for review. And they're in the process now of conducting a public hearing for that purpose. And they will be either doing an independent review prior to this board acting, or they will rely on what comes out of this hearing, and then decide whether or not they want a supplemental review on the results of that. So at any rate, it's going to be looked at by both towns in a way to make sure that it meets the intent and the requirements of the stormwater management regulations. So it's other than that, it's a fairly straightforward subdivision. It's a nice piece of property that has been there and hasn't been developed in the past because it had been in the family, hadn't been really released for that purpose. And now they're looking for an opportunity to actually do the subdivision and basically have this materialize in honor of the Medeiros family. With that, I think what I might want to do is either let you, if you want to go to your comments that you have, and we can address some of those, or go to questions that the members have.
So, am I on mute? Mr. Antonino, are you on the line?
He is there. Let me ask him to unmute.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Have you done a review of this yet? And where are you with that review?
Yes, so I did have an email transmission to Mrs. Farinacci, albeit it was this afternoon. As you may be aware, Mr. Chairman, I am transitioning to a different role. But in the meantime, until there's a new town engineer for the town, I am providing that technical review and support. In the email that I transmitted, I'm not sure if Mrs. Farinacci is able to share it, but basically I noted that the requirements for work in a Zone 2 Aquifer Protection District requires 10,000 square feet per bedroom on any given lot. And until they demonstrate that they actually meeting the denitrification requirements, those lots do not meet the requirements of the land space for development. If they are not able to demonstrate that they meet those requirements, then I'm afraid some of those lots can only be a two bedroom and 1 bedroom, and then there will be a deed restriction. Now they're showing they do have an area that they designate as a potential denitrification area for nitrogen loading. However, that you really cannot accomplish through an easement. You have to have a restrictive easement and covenant that limits the potential use for that area. So they have to demonstrate how they are using that to meet the denitrification requirements for the individual lot development. Keep in mind that you do need a denitrification, a nitrogen loading requirement for all the impervious areas. When you are in the Aquifer Protection District, your treatment requirement is 1 inch of precipitation over bituminous concrete impervious areas. Also, you will have to meet a recharge requirement of 1 inch precipitation. So those we have to look at closely. The other issue relates to the fact that these are not being developed as condominium projects. So you really cannot, if you had a development that is like a condominium development, then that is a single entity ownership. Then you can do a central nitrogen loading treatment compliance. So where you're proposing single house lots that are gonna be deeded to individual homeowners, bad idea of central denitrification to compensate for the wastewater wouldn't hold. And again, they have to demonstrate how they are meeting the requirements. I have to look at it more closely, how they're meeting the stormwater loading requirements. They also at the intersection of the proposed roadway, it is at its intersection with High Street. They don't meet the property line radius requirement. And I don't see a request for a waiver of that requirement. So, this board, just for the record, has not issued such waivers. So we have to figure out how they want to handle that. Perhaps the abutting land, I'm not sure what arrangements they have. They could acquire roadway easement in order to meet that radius requirement. And then, whereas you have a subdivision that is actually entirely in Bridgewater, and your stormwater management facility vis-a-vis the drainage basin is located entirely in a different community. Usually, the town of Bridgewater requires a bond for basin requirement maintenance. So it's a little bit dicey, if you will, how you would monitor compliance, where in fact the only thing that the town of East Bridgewater is getting is that drainage basin. So I'm not sure how we, if we go to take over that ownership of the roadway during accepted public way, the town of Bridgewater, whether the town of Bridgewater will have some sort of an agreement with the town of East Bridgewater for that drainage basin. So that the logistics for that have to be sort of ironed out and discussed with the East Bridgewater at least planning board. So those are my cursory review comments at this time. And obviously there's more work to be done. And I think based on the soil maps for the area, the expectation is that it will be primarily sandy material with some gravel. But obviously that needs to be evaluated. Some of the natural topography, some of the topography that is there, it's not a natural topography. That's from a lot of fill material that was deposited. So we have to identify where the virgin natural ground is in terms of determining the depth of pervious materials. And that's it for right now.
So, Mr. Antonio, when you're saying verify, do you need them to schedule, just so we can keep it moving? Do you need them to schedule test pits with you, or is that coordinated, or where is that? Do you want them or not want them? Or?
No, that would be correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Now, Mr. Silva, so that parcel A, is that intended to be a retreat lot with ZBA approval?
It's a parcel, it's a parcel at this point, and not a buildable parcel.
Okay.
Can I address or comment on the things that Azu has brought up at this point?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, well, the first one was about the intersection. That intersection is at High Street. The width of our right of way is 104 feet wide. So we have incorporated the radiuses into the length of the width of the right of way. It's a variable width right of way. So instead of having it be adjacent to the 40 feet, we've incorporated it so that we not only have the 20 foot incorporated into the width of the layout, we have a 45 foot width on the other side. So I think that if you look at what your requirements are, I think we far exceeded the width of the layout at High Street than what your requirements would require. Yours would require 40 feet plus 20 feet on each side for radiuses. That would get you to 80. We're at 104 feet. So that's just to keep that in mind. The second one, as it relates to the zone 2, the only thing I don't want the board to get confused here is zone 2 requirements as it relates to the lots, I don't believe is within the purview of the planning board. The fact that the zone is a residential C The lots are being laid out for residential C purposes and to their dimensions. The issues that Azu talks about as far as nitrification issues and denitrification issues and so forth, they're Board of Health issues. And we will satisfy the Board of Health on all of those. Much the same as like on Summer Street, we had a number of lots that were in a district that allowed smaller lot sizes, and then we set aside parcels which were to meet the requirements for nitrate loading, nitrogen loading. So I just don't want the board to get confused that issue, as I see it, is not a planning board issue. That's really a Board of Health issue. And then the third one was about the stormwater management. And as I had indicated before, we are treating it, and we understand it's a zone 2. We are going to the higher loading, and we are working with East Bridgewater we are in a process of getting that approval from East Bridgewater as well. And as far as test pits, we will schedule with Azu to be able to go out and do it. I've done some myself, and like I say, 25 feet plus is all sand and gravel. I just wanted to respond to the 4 comments, or 3 comments.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think I would agree with the layout information. As I said, it was a cursory review. My office being in transition, if in fact they have 104 feet right of way at that intersection, yes, then they will be able to meet that requirement. In other words, what they're showing you, I have to look at the template. I have to do a template to make sure that we can fit a proper radius on that side. So that is something that they can demonstrate that they can meet. On the issue of the compliance with the issue with the compliance with the zone 2 requirements, actually it is in the purview of this board. The board has to find that the lots that are being developed, this is a definitive subdivision. This is not our approval, not required application. So in order for you to act, yes, it's primarily in terms of zone 2, it is primarily a Board of Health requirement through the DEP. Right now, they have not demonstrated, in my opinion, they have not demonstrated compliance with that. So the board, in fact, must and should consider compliance with the nitrogen loading to make sure that those lots that are being created are viable lots. Just like they properly noted on the plan that one of those lots that is shown as a parcel, it's not a building lot. So if they're showing you on those 9 lots or 8 lots or 10 lots, they're showing you that they're proposing lots that comply. It is within the purview of this board. As a matter of fact, Chapter 41L requires that the planning board not act on approve a definitive subdivision until a Board of Health has reviewed and approved to make sure that public health, safety, and welfare are being promoted. So it is 100% relevant to the deliberation of this planning board.
The only, I had small comments. I think that the street trees are still shown in the layout, which is a minor thing.
Why would they not be in the layout?
The street trees,
Yes.
we typically ask them to be right behind the line. Isn't that what's in our rules and regs?
The rules and regs actually say that they should be in the layout. If you go to section,
You may be right. I think it's been DPW's request typically, and I think on most subdivisions, we have that 10-foot planting easement typically, John, where the trees are outside of the layout. But is that changing under your direction, Ms. Montanaro, or where are we with that?
No, that was before, if you remember, the board reviewed and revamped the rules and regulations. So the trees can be in the layout. Yeah, the trees can be in the layout. They just have to be not inside the sidewalk area dedicated for sidewalk.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right, I'm wrong on that one. All right. I think it's better in the layout than the town can maintain them, but I think it was the prior practice. I don't know if that we always had them outside of the layout.
Yeah, well, that was the prior practice, Mr. Chairman, just like we used to have with drainage basins being in an easement. And that created a problem for the town after street acceptance. Private property owners recognizing that the town has right to those easements. And very often, when the street acceptance was done, it never, the deed of describing the area that is being conveyed to the town never really properly identified those easements. And so it used to create a legal issue for the town. So that's why we went into requiring that the drainage basins be in a separate parcel. And then now we move the trees to be within the right of way so that we can clearly identify the ownership. Because if you put those street trees in those 10-foot easements,
They could disappear.
if the tree became a problem where they need to trim or the town will say, well, it's not a public tree. It's not in the layout. So the town doesn't really have the obligation to manage those trees. So it makes more sense that it be in the layout.
All right, so there were two other items that I just wanted to go through to make sure that we're understood. As far as the lights, it would be our intention to have driveway lights on each lot. If that is an okay way to go, if the board is okay with that. And then the other item I just wanted to point out is that your roadway cross section doesn't work. So if I take you to, let's see, if I take you to your section, cross section, which shows for 40-foot layout for the 5 to 10 lot. Yeah, 5 to 10 lot. It shows that it's an offset layout. So it shows the center line being 15 feet from one side, 25 feet from the other. But then it shows that the drainage needs to be 7 feet from that center line. And if it goes 7 feet from that center line, the problem is that it ends up being right where the catch basins are. That there isn't room between the catch basins and the drain line in order for that to actually be constructible. So I just wanted to point that out to you. It might be something that you want to look at in terms of your typical layout, just to see if possibly it needs a little tweaking in there. But we're calling out for basically a waiver from strict compliance with it because of that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we have to take a look at that because that was, you might be, I will have to get back to you on that, Mr. Silva. But I believe you might be conflating the current regulations with the 2007 regulations. The 2007 regulations created that offset layout when Mr. Dyer was the chairman of the board. I think that you might be referring to that detail. That detail has since been changed. So you might be conflating the details, but we have to look at that and resolve it.
I'm looking at the one that's 2018. And it's detail number 1E. So when you get a chance, if you take a look at that one, but it is in the 2018.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
All right. And I think that was the only items that I had, aside from scheduling something with Azu to go out there to do test pits.
Okay, so I'll open it up to board questions for either staff or Mr. Silva. at this point?
And Mr. Chairman, at this point, I don't have any questions. I think the main thing is for the town engineer and Larry to try to resolve some of the issues that Sue brought up. Then we could talk more in detail.
The one other comment I saw somewhere is, are we waiting on a landscape plan, Mrs. Marinacci? Is that a comment that was made?
Yes, we do not have a landscape plan from a landscape architect.
Is there anything else we're missing from the applicant, just so we can make sure they get everything in?
He addressed the lighting. That was the only other question, but I have no lighting details. So if we could please have some lighting details provided, that would be
Okay.
excellent.
So we'll add a post light for the driveways, and we'll show them on the plan, on the revised plan that shows compliance with that.
Is there, I know I heard from Ray, and I'm having trouble seeing people. Mr. Geller, Mrs. Garino, are there any comments at this point?
No, I would have to agree with Ray that there's some things that need to be worked out.
Mrs. Garino?
No, I don't have any comments right now.
Okay, so are there any members of the public that have sent a chat, a request to speak?
There
Or
are, so Ms. McLeod or Mrs. McLeod, she had asked some questions in the chat. Would you like to unmute to ask your questions, please?
Yes.
Yes,
So I live at 989 High Street, which, if you're looking at the plan, is right across the lot from lot 9. And so my question would be, there are no storm drainage basins on High Street. How many of these lots will actually drain towards High Street and not towards that drainage basin in the back?
Mr. Silva, would you mind answering that?
Well, there's currently drainage that goes in that direction now. There's a good section of the site that actually drains in the existing conditions, that drains down towards her property. When we develop the individual lots, none of the roadway drainage really will be going in that direction. The grading for the first lot on that side, lot 9, a portion of it will be going towards High Street. And if you look on page 7, sheet 7.
Jasmine, can you
Yep,
see
we can
sheet
get in
7?
there. Yep. It's just taking a long
You
to
slowed
load. Sorry,
down.
guys.
You slowed down on me, Jazz.
Sorry.
So Mr. Silva, I don't.
Slow
In
loading.
the front, on the
Are
front of
there-
lot 7.
There are 2 catch basins shown at the intersection of the street, or no?
There are 2 catch basins, and they're taking the water back.
Yeah.
They're taking it back to the back of the site. So the roadway drainage is not coming towards High Street. And that first lot is, there's a small portion of it, of the grading for that lot that will be going towards High Street, but it's far less than what is currently going towards High Street. So I'm going to say that there's going to be a dramatic reduction from the lot grading and from the roadway improvements to the water that actually goes in that direction towards High Street.
Mrs. McLeod, do you have any additional questions?
Yes, I do. So also the street is pretty busy, and I know that you had said that this roadway would fit into the radius, but it is pretty dangerous just backing my car out into High Street without getting hit with that intersection with Hayward Street being so close. Is there any, like, considering where that actual intersection will be to where that intersection with High and Hayward is? I mean, this road is heavily trafficked. more than I ever expected.
So just a follow-up question, Mr. Silva, Mr. Antonio, does this meet the line of sight requirements?
That would be correct, Mr. Chairman. So we have to take a look at that. And we do have a requirement for setback of intersection of a roadway and then a adjoining driveway. So we have to take a look at the distance between the adjoining driveway and the proposed street intersection.
So she's talking about a driveway across the street.
Well, how was that right? Okay, so
I'm talking about I'm talking about where this road, like the subdivision entrance to High Street, it's busy. I sit here and look out my window all day because I work from home, and cars pull over in that spot daily because it's a vacant lot, and it causes so much traffic backup by just a car pulling over. So imagine now a car trying to pull out, and there's cars coming both directions, and it's not an easy intersection. So I can't, I'm wondering, what is that distance to the intersection with the entrance of High Street for the subdivision to the intersection with Hayward? And does it really meet that radius for the, High Street's a collector street considered with the town. So there's certain radius that is supposed to be set back from my understanding with the bylaws.
So the basically, Mr. Chairman, the for a line of sight, they have to based on the what you have for High Street, we will need our 250 feet of because High Street would be a 45-mile-an-hour design and operating speed. So from that Hayward Street intersection, you will need a clear line of sight of 200 to 250 feet. So we'll have to take a look at that. But also keep in mind that you can accomplish an attenuate certain traffic concerns by signage. So you could, if you look at some of the roads that we travel in town, you will see a sign with the yellow warning sign that says our intersection 100 feet or 200 feet away. So you can have those warning sign, traffic signs posted on both directions of High Street, and then also put a stop sign on the proposed roadway as for vehicles coming out of that subdivision into negotiating with turning movement onto High Street. So
yeah, Azu. One thing that, could you go back to that sheet there, Jasmine?
Yeah.
The one we were just looking at. I just want to point out to you is one of the things that we really need to talk about is if you look on that plan where High Street actually is located, the roadway is partially outside of the layout of High Street. So you can see the traveled way in High Street, the double line, that you can see how it comes up towards our road. It's getting further away from the actual layout of High Street. It's skewed to the north. So the curve in that area is actually more dramatic than it was supposed to be. They never moved the roadway to be within the layout.
no, I understand that, and being on a curve, Mr. Chairman, actually makes the argument for the concern that the abutter has. So I do think that we need to look at that intersection, but I do think where you can also accomplish some and assuage some of those concerns with the traffic signage. But I do think
we can look at that too when we're out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Antonero, line of sight in our rules and regs is only 200 feet for a residential sub-collector street, not 250, right?
No, but High Street is actually not a sub-collector. It is a collector.
All right.
Because it runs traffic. It's not a sub-collector because it runs traffic from 104 to Route 28.
Okay. All right, but you'll look at that as part of your review.
Yes, and 104 and 28 are arterial rural arterial roadways. Therefore, High Street, it's actually picking up a sub-collector road will be, example, Bridge Street. Okay. Or, but High Street itself is a collector because it picks up a lot of neighborhood roads and then carries them to the arterial roadway. So it is not a sub-collector, it is a collector.
Mr. Silva, how far is, how many feet roughly is this street from the intersection of High and Hayward?
It's a considerable distance. I'm not sure exactly what that distance is. I'm going to say, it's in excess of, I think it's close to like over 300, I think. I'm looking here, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 4, it's 43. It's about 300, I think.
So how do we deal with that issue? I'm just looking at, let's see.
Well, as you said, I mean, we can look at what the issues are as it relates to what signage might be beneficial along that stretch. I think the town, and now Azu in his new role, might want to be looking at High Street and whether or not High Street needs to be a softer curve within the layout that it really has. It's a steeper curve than it needs to be.
So I'm just reading alignment of streets because that's where I was getting the line of sight. So it just says intersections of collector or sub-collector streets with arterial streets will not normally be allowed at intervals of less than 400 feet. That's
not, yeah, that's not what this is.
Okay. All right. And then the line of sight stuff is item 4, but you guys work all that out. So,
yeah.
All right.
And we'll take a look at where her driveway is and see how it plays into what's going on here.
Okay. Mrs. McLeod, do you have any more questions?
Well, it's not my driveway's consideration. I'm just in consideration of the street. And if we create a subdivision, you know, what kind of safety, we have to look at that in regards to the traffic on the street where, you know, we have this intersection with the sub collector. It is fairly close, like within 300 feet and on a curve, you know, think of all the cars that are going to try to come out, pull in, you know, that's a huge issue. So I think that should be considered when we're designing this, and redesigning High Street to meet the subdivision should not be one of the things we look at.
Well, the town actually is, the town is the one that actually created that configuration, because it used to have a configuration that High Street bent up and split and went up to Haywood Street in a different way. And it was back when they reconfigured it, I think it was in the, maybe the 1960s or something right there, that they actually are the ones that reconfigured it, the town did. They did this geometry at that time, but we'll look at, see how it, you know, how it works and how it maybe need to be adjusted.
McLeod, or any other abutters concern residents?
Mrs. Mamity, would you still like to speak? I know you had your hand raised. Or you just have to unmute, I'm sorry.
Thank you, I appreciate it. My name is Anne Marie Mamadi. I'm at 60 Copperfield Drive. My property is directly abutting the proposed retaining wall, the 231-foot retaining wall. I had a couple of questions. The first question was, there are property stakes that have been put in, and it actually wasn't necessarily what we expected. I was wondering if those are accurate.
There are no property stakes that were put in. The stakes that are out there are what's called control stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Those are stakes so that we know where we are when we're actually doing survey out there. They're not representative of corners. Now, if we found evidence at a corner that existed, we would have identified it and then maybe a stake next to something like that. But we did not stake out the property line. So I believe that the stakes that you're seeing are ones from our control stakes.
So
And,
those had nothing to do with the property.
Well, they have nothing to do with exact locations. They're just reference points for us.
I see, I see. When will that be surveyed for property lines, or is that not in the plans?
It'd be staked out as part of a subdivision. The property lines would be staked out as part of the subdivision. There is a requirement when you create a subdivision that you actually have to stake out the property corners as part of it.
Okay. I had a couple other questions if you all have time. Would the retaining wall or the catch basin pose any danger to, say, a child or somebody that wandered there? And are there any plans for maybe ensuring the safety?
Yes, so retaining walls, if the retaining wall is a potential safety issue, then there would have to be a fence on the top of the retaining wall to make sure that somebody doesn't inadvertently fall off a high, something of significant height.
Okay. And also at the base of Copperfield Drive, if you look at our cul-de-sac, we have a utility easement that is actually exceedingly close to where you're putting in the catch basin. I was wondering if you had plans of using that utility easement and what that would look like for us.
The utility easement is going to be utilized because the town of Bridgewater requires that the water be looped. So the water from this subdivision is going to be looped into Copperfield. That's going to actually be a benefit so that you're going to actually see improved water pressure and I would say quality too. But that's a requirement of the town that whenever you're doing a subdivision that you loop the water. Sometimes it's not possible to loop to another subdivision. In this case, that access and utility easement provided the mechanism for us to be able to show that. And we show it on one of the sheets. I forgot which one, but it does show a water line going into Copperfield.
So there would be, so that our easement there and Copperfield would be dug up for
just for the installation of the water main.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Just for the installation of a water main.
For the installation of a water main. And then after you're completed with that, you would
restore it,
grade it, restore it to the way that
Absolutely.
it is. Do you know
Yes.
how long that would take for that to be completed? And would that impact our driveway or our access to our home in any way?
It's not going to take long. The tie-in may take a little bit longer because that has to be done. Depends on where it actually, the tie is made. But you're looking at something that's I want to say a week's work of activity that would be in that area. And they certainly would not do anything that would impede you being able to get in and out of your property.
Okay, okay. And I had just one last question. The previous owners had left a great deal of extra tires and paraphernalia that is right along our border, right along our property line, actually, all the way around it. And I don't know where the property line is, so we really haven't had to know. So is all that just guaranteed to be cleaned up, or what are your plans for that?
I would say that it would be cleaned up, but I would say that this board would probably put a condition on an approval that required that to be cleaned up so that you know that it would be happening. In other words, they can condition the approval, so it says that any tires or any kind of trash or anything that's on the site will be removed as part of the construction.
Okay, so anything that was left from the previous owners will be removed.
I would say yes. I don't know what you're referring to, but I would say anything that's left there that's debris would be not going to be buried on the site. It's going to be taken out.
Okay, I just wanted that cleared up because I didn't want to have to clear up old tires that I have no access to.
Okay. And I would say the only caveat is if it's on this property. I'm not sure.
Sure.
I'm not sure where they are, but I'm guessing that you know that they're on this property.
As I said, that section is woods to us. We have not had any need to use it.
That's why you're asking.
Right.
And so that's why we were asking about if
Okay.
the orange stakes represented a property line.
I understand.
Do you have any more questions, or can we move on to the next?
I think, anything else? I think we're all set. Thank you very much for answering our questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Farinacci, do we have, is that Roni Johnson?
We actually had Stephanie Roberts first, who'd asked a question in the chat. Stephanie,
Okay.
would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you. Stephanie Roberts, I am at 979 High Street. And I don't want to like really harp or like have to go back too far. But in regards to what Michelle was saying about the roadway here and the intersection, my driveway is actually legitimately directly across from where the roadway is going. And it's right now there's like a dirt road. There's the current existing dwellings driveway, and then a dirt road, which is seemingly where this road is going to be placed in. And my driveway is directly across from both of those. So I really have a lot of the same concerns that Michelle has, where I'm right on that curve. It's nearly impossible to get out of our driveway unless you're backed in. And it's really dangerous here, the traffic, and with the added traffic of having a subdivision here, like we can't even from our house to the corner, if we want to walk, if I want to take my 2 young children walking, I have to walk on a street that's very busy and has no sidewalks. And now we're talking about adding a subdivision in across from my driveway. I have no way, I'm not going to have any way of getting out. So I thought that Azu had said something about it being offset from a current driveway, and I just wasn't sure if there was any clarification for that, and if there's any sort of talks or plans or requirements about putting sidewalks in this area of the street if we're going to be having that increased traffic. We already have a lot of truck traffic that's not supposed to be going through here, that goes through here anyways, and being on this corner, it's just really dangerous.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Do you, any other concerns, or are we good to move on?
No, I was just, is there any way that we can get clarification on that? If the street will be off, has to be offset from the driveway, or?
Well, I think that, we're just trying to gather information tonight. Mr. Antonero and the applicant are obviously both here. So part of his technical review will be to consider all this in traffic and safety and whatnot. So when we expect to have that at the next meeting. So your comments are good, and he'll take those into consideration, and the board will as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have
Mr.
anybody?
Johnson, would you like to still ask your question?
How you doing?
Hi.
I apologize. I came to the call late, so I apologize if you guys already covered this. I live at 40 Town Line Circle, and I was just wondering how far back are you guys planning to come back for the new units?
Can you see the screen, the plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't see which one's 40. Which one's 40?
It's towards the back, the last one.
It was the packet, was that the packet house?
Yes,
Okay, so the packet, that's, there's not houses that are in that area. The houses, as you can see in that image right there, your house is the one that's on the right, over there, right where she's got the cursor right now.
yes.
And the houses that we're proposing are further down.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments, Mr.
Yes,
Furlong?
I have a question. Gerald Souza.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mr. Souza.
I'm at 27 Rainbow Circle. I have a question regarding the retaining wall. Once the development is finished, who's responsible for maintaining it? For example, if it falls, it breaks, it cracks, and who's going to be responsible for maintaining that entire drainage easement?
Mr. Antonero, do you want to answer that for the town?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, like I said, I would take a look at it more closely. We do not, and I stress, we do not allow retaining walls within the right of way. If you may recall, that came up with Firefly Lane, right off of Summer Street. And they had to move that wall outside of the right of way. So we do not, for that express purpose, the town does not assume responsibility for retaining walls in a subdivision. So they will have to do the design work and control the grading outside of that right of way. So that retaining wall will not be allowed within the right of way if the town were to approve the subdivision.
So Mr. Antonero, the right of way, there don't appear to be any walls, but in the drainage lot, there does. Are you including the drainage lot as part of the right of way?
No. When I say right of way, we're talking about the travel of roadway.
Yeah, these are not in that, they're in the drainage easement.
A couple of other things that I'd like to bring to Larry's attention.
So Mr. Antonero, sir, are you all set with your questions before we continue?
Well, I don't think the question's been answered. The retaining wall is, my understanding, it's a structure. If that falls down in 5 years or 10 years, who's responsible for repairing it?
So that is a good question, and I believe if in fact it's in the road drainage, if it's in the drainage basin, I'm not sure if you were online when we were discussing the drainage earlier.
I was.
Where okay, and there were made mention of the fact that you have the drainage basin in a different community, which will be East Bridgewater, while the stormwater system contributing runoff to that basin is in Bridgewater. So I believe that if in fact that wall is within the drainage basin, and if the town accepts the public way and the drainage system, the town will be assuming responsibility for that. And so it is actually a very, very good comment and question that you have raised. And therefore, we have to look at it more critically to make sure that that becomes responsibility of the developer and not the town of Bridgewater.
Thank you.
Mrs. Farinacci, do you have anybody else?
Ms. McLeod would like to ask one more question, please.
Sure.
Yes, so I would also like to ask if, I know you had on one of the plans, you had kind of your nuisance condition regs, how you would control dust. Is there any way we can get that detailed? Like what happens if there is, a period of time where there's no construction activity, but we do have windy days that would create a dust condition with nuisance? I know that, we can enforce, do enforcement on that, or the state or a town can, but I have a child with asthma, so I just want to make sure that this is kind of set in stone and we have a pretty good reg, because I don't want to have to go through enforcement, because of nuisance conditions left on the site with dust. with it being sand and gravel, I think that should be also considered when you're clearing out the land.
Okay, thank you. Any other participants asking to speak, Mrs. Farinacci?
I don't see anyone in the chat. And I don't see any more hands raised.
All right, so if we don't have any more board comments, last chance of board comments or questions.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Going back to Zoo's comment about the retaining wall. Is it not, if this becomes a town accepted street, then isn't the town responsible for not the whole drainage system, the detention basin and the retaining wall and everything, simply by the nature of us accepting the street?
Mr. Jimmy, that is why I made that comment that we have to take a look at it more closely, and we will have to make sure that that retaining wall is not within an area that the town will take responsibility for. And then if it means that they need to redesign their project by eliminating a house lot to make it work, then that should be what they will have to do.
Okay, so just for clarification, then the retaining wall is not part of the detention basin or the drainage system. Is that correct?
I have not taken that's Mr. Jimmy, I have not looked at it that close. And that I will do that.
Okay.
I will do that. The two other things in relation to that grading issue. If you look at the subdivision, the grading plan, they might be creating a situation similar to what you have on Oldfield Estates, where you end up having too steep an embankment in the back of lots, where it could have created a runoff impoundment on those lots, necessitating a potential modification to cure a problem that may be associated with the grading. So they have to look at a couple of the three lots that as you come into the subdivision, right on the bend, there are three lots with very steep grading approaching the back of the houses that are going to be built on those lots. And then the other comment that I have, as was alluded to earlier, relates to the streetlights. The subdivision rules and regulations do indeed allow for the use of driveway post lights. But as you may recall, we had an issue with the subdivision on South Street. I believe it's called Colonial Drive, where the driveway post lights were put in the wrong locations, and they had to go back to the individual homeowners because they had already conveyed out those lots, and they ended up having to put street lights, actual street lights, in lieu of driveway post lights. So I would suggest to the board that if they're gonna do street lights, let's be proactive in requiring that those driveway post lights be put in as part of the road layout, so that the board is not forced into a situation where it has to now grant a subdivision modification because the driveway lights are put in. If you recall, on Colonial Drive, some of the post lights were actually in front of the houses, not at the driveway. And we have specific requirement for the location and sighting of driveway post lights. So I just want to make sure that we don't create a situation where this board has to now be forced into allowing a modification because the driveway post lights were not put in where they are supposed to put in.
That can be verified by making sure they're in the as-built, right?
Yes, yes, and that is true, but I think when they're building the house, that be made and not be left to the homeowner, because when you're building a subdivision, you can do those curb cuts for those lots. So if you do those curb cuts, you don't necessarily have to build a driveway all the way from where the house is gonna be. But if you have those curb cuts at the time that they're putting binder down and put those post lights, then you wouldn't have the issue. If we are waiting at the end after they build their houses to show the post lights, now the planning board might be put in an inconvenient, untenable position, having to issue a modification that could have easily been avoided.
Right.
All right, any other board questions or comments?
Yes, please, Pat. Larry, could you explain the septic systems that would be used? You mentioned about the nitrogen.
There is technology out there that is basically, it's like a pre-treatment or a treatment of the flow coming out of the house itself. So it basically does a cleaning to the point where it reduces the amount of nitrates that find their way into the soil. So by doing that, you can meet some of the requirements. And so there are different ways to be able to come into compliance with the Zone 2 regulations. And so in some cases, we're planning on doing a combination of both. Some of them, they may require denitrification units that are part of the septic, and sometimes it's just going to be set aside land that would be earmarked to offset the amount needed for the number of bedrooms that are going to be in that house. But we have to do that plan in a way that gets signed off. I don't think DEP, Azu, I don't think DEP signs off anymore. I think it's at the local level now. So I think it's Board of Health now, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we have to do that plan that satisfies the Board of Health that we're actually accounting for the number of bedrooms that, and what it comes down to is it's 10,000 square feet per bedroom, or basically, or mitigation of nitrogen loading. So you got two ways to meet the requirements.
And is that a more expensive running system, or is that the type of system that needs to be?
It's a little bit more to operate it, you mean?
Yeah.
It's got a little bit more operational cost, but nothing significant. It's more like running there's like more a fan component in it that that is going to maybe cost a little bit more to operate than a regular system. But that would all have to be obviously disclosed to anybody buying a lot in the subdivision, that that's what it's going to require on that particular lot.
Okay, because and now that you say that has to be exposed, I had just read something, I think it was down in Sandwich, and it wasn't exposed. And there was one house that opted to have it removed, which then now turned her 3-bedroom home into a 2-bedroom.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Mrs. Garino, you raised an important comment and question, because when you're trying to accomplish those with the denitrification systems on individual homeowners, the developer might meet the requirement, the initial requirement. But historically, there have been cases in Lakeville, in West Bridgewater, and actually in East Bridgewater, where people do not do that maintenance. They do not do that requirement, okay? So for it to be viable and allowable, you have to have an actual enforcement mechanism that requires maintenance. But it's very hard to get our individual homeowners to meet those requirements. And all they will have to do, those individual denitrification systems require quarterly maintenance agreement with the vendor that provided that equipment. And a lot of the homeowners just don't do they bypass those because of the cost of that ongoing perpetual maintenance. So might have to, in my opinion, I will be leaning more to making sure that both this board and the Board of Health has a more concrete when compliance mechanism than a design that requires ongoing maintenance by individual homeowners. That property, when it's sold 2 or 3 times down the road, they're not gonna do it. You know it. That's just how we do it. That's just the way it works. So we have to look at a more verifiable and concrete compliance mechanism in order to make it work.
Okay, any other board questions? Mr. Did I hear somebody or was? No?
No.
Okay. Mr. Antonero, Mr. Silva, what's your timeline to get a review done, get test bits done, get us a thorough review? Mr. Silva revised plans, next meeting too aggressive, 2 meetings out, where should we go?
From my scheduling standpoint, Mr. Chairman, I do think our next meeting will be rather aggressive and optimistic. And I think our 2 meetings removed might be a much attainable goal.
So Mr. When would that meeting be?
The 16th, June 16th is 2 meetings out. Our next one is June 2nd.
All right, we can always schedule it for then, and if the applicant's not ready, we can continue it.
The applicant's not ready?
For the town, both, yeah.
Okay, if either one. Putting it all on me as a.
Well, yeah, I have to.
All right, so.
Okay, so we'll go to the 16th.
So, well, do we have is the board, I know we're getting into the summer months, is the board available on the 16th?
Yes.
Okay, and then do we have a motion to continue this to June 16th at 6:30?
I'll make the motion to continue the hearing to June 16th at 6:30.
By Mr. Jemian. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Jean.
By Mrs. Greeno. Any discussion? So just for those of you in attendance and interested in this project, there are no more notifications. So this is the one notification you got is it. It's your responsibility to remember that the next public meeting, a public hearing meeting on this is June 16th at 6:30, if the board votes that way. So without any other discussion, I'll take the roll call. Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
Mr. Geller?
Yes.
Mrs. Guarino?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, thank you. So this is continued to June 16th at 6:30.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Silva.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night,
Bye.
Mr. Tenera.
Thank you.
All right, do we have
Minutes.
minutes to approve? I saw
Yes.
some comments back and forth, emails.
From April
Um,
14th.
Are we okay with approving those minutes of April 14th? Do we have a motion?
I did read them and hopefully the highlighted spots came through.
So do we have a motion to approve those minutes with the script? They're basically Scribner's errors, correct?
Yes.
With the errors corrected?
Well, I just sent it.
No, not yet.
Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the Scribner's corrections.
That you
Or-
provided today?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Geller? Any discussion? Mrs. Guarino?
Yes.
Mr. Geller?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Do we have anything else this evening?
That was it for this evening.
All right. so do
Jennifer,
we-
are you going to be at the June 2nd meeting, Jennifer, or? No, okay, so Jennifer won't be at the June 2nd or the 16th, correct?
So are you still gonna be Ms. Burke at your July meeting? Or
Yes.
are we gonna have a different name?
It will be a different name.
Really? You're not gonna keep Professional Burke?
That's yet to be decided. Personally, it'll be a different name.
You better tell me, so I won't, so I say it correctly.
I'll make sure you have plenty of notice. Pat.
What's it, that's Dombrowskis, you said?
No, DeBoberan.
Oh, that's close.
You got the D. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, well, congratulations, and
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations, John.
Thank you.
Right. Congratulations.
do we have
You want
a,
to just, in case there's people on that were here, maybe for the last thing that was canceled, you might want to just to announce
oh, okay.
that the app.
Oh,
Claremont
I'm
had
sorry, so,
requested.
so we did have a request by the Claremont companies to come and give a presentation to us to, I guess, renew talks about a potential restaurant up at the Lakeshore Commerce Center, if you want to call it that, the Planned Development District. And they decided to hold off on that until a later date because I think they want to do some more due diligence. Is that basically what the email said?
Yes, that's
And
correct.
they didn't propose any future dates or anything yet. Is that correct?
That is also correct. They have not proposed a future date yet.
Okay. All right. So with that being said, do we have a motion to adjourn
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
by Jean, second by Ray?
Yeah.
Mr. Jemian,
Yes.
Mrs. Guarino,
Yes.
Mr. Geller,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank
All
you.
right.
Good night, you guys.
Night.